Hey friends, so we live in a world with a lot of hatred and a lot of unloving behavior. And it's in this environment that Christians are claiming that Jesus is the only way to God. Is this statement bigoted? Is this statement intolerant? Can't all paths lead to God? These are the questions we're going to be looking into today. So imagine you and I are walking down the street and someone comes up to us and says, I am absolutely against any religion that says one faith is superior to another. I don't see how that is anything different than spiritual racism. It's a way of saying that we are closer to God than you, and that is what leads to hatred. In this scenario, what would you say? I'm going to go ahead and give you 4 points that I would consider when I was going to respond in this situation. First, it was actually Jesus himself that claimed to be the only way to God. He said that I am the way, the truth, and the life, and that nobody comes to the Father except through him. He also claimed to be the door, the only door that people can come and enter into to be with the Father. He claimed to be the one good shepherd to lead people. Jesus would not have just been arrogant, but he would have been a deceiver to make claims like this and not actually be God. But if he really was God, then these claims change everything for everyone. And like I showed in my last video on the resurrection, I think that is true. If you haven't watched that yet, I'd recommend checking that out. So in light of this, Christians are really just sharing the message that Jesus said. Another point to consider is that other religions claim exclusivity also. Do you know why this is? It's because all truth is by definition exclusive. All right, stay with me. Anytime someone makes a truth claim, they are affirming that this is not that. In the sense that if I pull this book out and I'm saying that this is a book, it truly is a book, I am inherently also stating that it is not something else. Some might even want to back out quickly and just say, oh, well, all right, there is no truth. But do you see that even in making the claim that there is no truth, you're making the truth claim that there is no truth? Okay, let me tell you a quick story that I think really illustrates these points well, all right? It's a story about two parents that are really excited for their date night, and they hire a babysitter to watch their child, watch their baby. While the babysitter's downstairs sitting on the couch, they hear a noise upstairs, so they go and they check it out. And they open the bathroom door and they see that the baby is there in the medicine cabinet, and they've got pills in their hands. They're eating the pills and they're saying, yummy, yummy, candy, candy. So what would you do in this situation? Would you impose your truth claims on the baby that those are really pills, and why couldn't it just be pills for you and candy for the kid? Well, if you would step in and take the pills away from the kid, then congratulations, you're a great babysitter and you're someone who believes in truth. So try to take this with us as we go forward. In reflecting on this story, try to see Christians as people that are simply following the evidence where it leads and sharing what they believe truly corresponds to reality, what truly is, kind of like the iPhone example, kind of like the baby with the pills example. If Christians claim that what Jesus' words were truly are reality, and Jesus claimed to be the only way to God, you could understand why people might say something like this. Okay, we're moving on. Point number 3 to consider is that attitude, no matter how unpleasant it is, doesn't affect truth value. You see, someone can be arrogant and right, and they can be arrogant and wrong. They could be humble and right, and they can be humble and wrong. All right, finally, point number 4. I actually heard this story about Penn Jillette. You've probably heard him, Penn and Teller. He's a magician, also an outspoken atheist, and he tells an amazing story about a man that came up to him after one of his shows and said, hey, I watched your show and I wanted to give this to you, and gives him a Bible. And essentially, Penn is just reflecting on the sense that how unloving would it be for someone to believe these things about reality and not share it with them. But let's take a break for a second and consider a really important question. What is tolerance? We always talk about being tolerant, but what is tolerant? By dictionary definition, means that you're showing a willingness to allow the existence of opinions or behaviors that one does not necessarily agree with. So let's look at what it means to be narrow-minded. A narrow-minded person is not willing to listen or tolerate other people's views. So it seems that intolerance and narrow-mindedness really rather comes down to one's attitude and how they carry out these things. So a tolerant person is someone who can state that, hey, I don't agree with you and I don't think that what you're saying is true, but I'm willing to hear you and I'm willing to listen to you openly and with a kind heart and with humility. So it seems like the answer isn't in affirming that everyone is right, like the story with the baby and the pills. No, it's actually in investigating the claims and figuring out which one is true, which one really corresponds to reality. Okay, here's where it's really important. I'm going to cover 5 of the most common questions that I get asked in regards to this topic. These are questions that you probably have, so I'm excited to cover them. The first question is, aren't all religions basically teaching the same thing? Well, let's just look at 2 religions specifically to see if we can answer this question. You see, because they claim contradictory things, they're not teaching the same thing, so they can't both be true. Another question that people typically ask, don't all roads lead to God? This is something that you might hear from someone like Oprah Winfrey. But this essentially is claiming that all religions are false because, like we talked about before and we gave examples, all religions are making exclusive truth claims. Buddhism doesn't even claim to be trying to get towards God. They try to claim to get towards annihilation. Okay, this, in my opinion, is the most serious question and the one that was most heartfelt to me. And it's the question about, what about those who have never heard or will never hear the gospel? So here's how we deal with this question as a Christian. So there are at least 2 truths that God reveals to everyone. One, he reveals himself through nature, through the world we see around us. And 2, through the moral law in our hearts that God has put, or you could say our conscience, in knowing right or wrong. This can be called God's general revelation. So everyone has this. And because of that, everyone is responding to God in some way. I always just best answer this with an example. Say on some remote island, there's a young kid who has never heard the gospel and won't hear it in his lifetime. And he wakes up each day and he goes and works and, sees the intricacies of nature, sees different snakes and their patterns and plants and their patterns, sees the ocean, sees the sunset, and says, man, there must be something out there. There must be something bigger. He sees how different interactions happen in his tribe and he feels certain ways towards certain things. He doesn't like when his mother's beat or mistreated in this example. And, one day this boy gets down on his knees and says in his own language, in his own way, I don't know what you are, God, but I know that there must be something out there, and I want to honor you, and I want to do what is right. I know what is right, I see what is wrong, and I want to do what is right. That person is responding to God's general revelation. And from the Christian's perspective, this person still is being saved by the grace of Jesus Christ. It's kind of like, if you think about the example, like let's say you found out one day that you just had some rich uncle and you were in their will. This person and the people that are responding to God's revelation that will never hear about Jesus are receiving his grace as a beneficiary, even if they didn't know it. And it's kind of like the same way people were saved in the Old Testament. They were saved by faith. If you look in the scripture here, it alludes to it. Anyone saved is saved by the atoning sacrifice of Jesus Christ. A rebuttal to this might be, what about the verse in the scripture that states, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, then you will be saved. So with that statement, it states a sufficient condition of salvation, but it doesn't state a necessary condition of salvation. Another question that people bring forward is that, isn't how a person lives and treats their neighbor more important than what they believe theologically? So let's think about it this way for a quick second. Think about like a courtroom type of situation. God is fully loving because he is also fully just and for justice. And because he's perfectly just, and because that we fall short of that state of perfection, we have incurred guilt in the courtroom. And it's in this context where you can say like, hey, I'm still a good person. I know that, okay, you are, sure. We all do good acts and there is goodness in humanity. But the problem is that God is perfectly just, and a perfectly just God, we want God to be perfectly just. God, why won't you do something about this? Well, in order for God to be perfectly just, he has to punish sin. But thankfully, that's what the purpose of Jesus was for, to come and be able to punish sin so that he could pardon us. You see how that works? So, sure, you can be a good person, but that doesn't affect your spiritual standing with God. You're still guilty, and you can never do enough good works to reach perfection once you have fallen short. So that penalty and that work that Jesus did is necessary for even, good people, because they're still guilty. So Jesus didn't come to make bad or good people better. He came to make sinners and dead people alive. So people might ask in this situation, what about Gandhi? What happened to him? And I'll say, the same thing that Abraham said. Will the judge of the whole world not do what is right? And I trust God's character, and I know God's character, to do what is right and what is just. Once again, we're talking about his perfect justice. I know that he'll do what is right, whatever the case may be. I'm not in a position to say. But everyone is judged based upon, remember, like we talked about, the light that God has revealed to them. What does it even mean to be a good person or a good human? And a fundamental thing that's really changed the way I thought about it is that a good human is someone that is carrying out their function the way it's supposed to be carried out. In the same way that if your grandmother was using your iPad as a cutting board, you'd be like, no, Grandma, that's not what it was for, because that's not the function it was made for. And in the same way, humans were created to function with God. So essentially, someone that is rejecting God is going against their function and not being a good person. They can't be a good person because the fundamental way they're supposed to live, they've rejected. Okay, the last question we have today. Wasn't Jesus just a good man and a good teacher? Well, the problem is that Jesus claimed very radical things, and you can't claim the things that Jesus claimed, and if they weren't true, be a good teacher. You'd be a false prophet. And the last time I checked, false prophets weren't good. So you have a problem here. You can't claim Jesus as a good teacher and then deny everything that he taught. It's just not possible to have it both ways. But hey, this is what this channel is all about. It's about hearing honest and heartfelt questions and giving honest and heartfelt answers. So if this is the kind of content you find valuable, these are the kind of videos you like to watch, please, go ahead and subscribe. That way you can come on board and go along these questions with us. But you know me, if you watched the last video, I'm going to get real with you. Why don't most people choose to follow Jesus, but rather turn towards, New Age spirituality or something of that sort? Simply, I think that in the example, let's say you have Buddhism. Buddhism allows for you to segment your life and say that I will practice my spirituality from 5 to 7 in the afternoon, do some meditation, put some incense on, put some music on, align my chakras, and then I can go about living my life in whatever way I really want, in a sense. Islam has a lot of geopolitical pull towards it, and it's a big cultural thing. Hinduism, it's got philosophy that sounds really nice, but at the end of the day, I was in this stage myself. I was in that spot myself where I became convinced that some kind of God exists, and then I kind of floated around in that New Age spirituality type of a thing, because it allowed me to continue to do the things that I wanted to do with a dose of God in it. But guess what? I tried to define what's right or wrong for me in the past, and it brought me harm. And maybe you have tried to do that as well, and it brought you harm. And I can say that Jesus' way, although he's calling you to come and die and be obedient to him, it's for your good, because like the verse earlier stated, he's the good shepherd, and God is the loving Father who is for our good. Loving someone is willing their good, and he wills our good. So following him will be the greatest good that you ever do. So Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. That claim is true if Christianity is true. And if you haven't seen my last video on the resurrection, do that. But not only that, Jesus is not only the way, the truth, and the life, but he's my way, my truth, and my life. And he can be yours too, if you simply accept his invitation of relationship. He wants to be in a relationship with you. You can, there's no amount of good works you can do to earn your way to God. It's a free gift of salvation that he extends to you. He just wants you. He wants you to enter into this process of spiritual formation to become more like him. And nobody did humanity better than Jesus Christ. So what will you do? Will you follow him?